Okay, you can start.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jason Wong, and welcome to our Contractors webinar, sponsored by the Southern Arizona CCIM chapter. Before we introduce our panel, I would like to recognize our sponsors. A big thank you to our sponsors. Their sponsorship allows our chapter to produce these informative webinars. Thank you to Tiffany Miner for her help in helping to put together the webinar. Her help is very invaluable. Today, landlords, developers, lenders, and tenants are upset, really upset that construction is taking so long. It's difficult to set a delivery date for the tenants. In addition to the delays in construction, material costs are rising. No one is happy. What is causing the delays? What can be done to keep a project on track in terms of delivery and budget? How does the lender view the delays and cost overruns? To help us get a better understanding on these issues are Jeannie Nguyen of National Bank of Arizona, Sally Bach of G2 Contracting, Mike Epstein of Epstein Construction, and Matt Watsa of MW Morrissey. Today's format is an open discussion on the following topic. Stop the excuses, get the damn project completed. Panelists, are you ready?
Yeah.
Yes.
Ready.
Okay, we'll start with Sally. Sally, how do you tell your client the budget is blown?
Well, first of all, I specialize in office and retail tenant improvements. So at the start of the project, it's a little easier to come up with a realistic budget. I think that the challenges of a ground up project might be a little bit more inept to a budget being blown. But fortunately, I haven't experienced any of budgets being blown over the last several months because I have implemented some strategies that I think have helped that. And some of those strategies are explaining clear expectations with the delays in materials, the challenges with our labor, manpower, and providing the clear and consistent communication all along the project. We also, as a team, do our due diligence up front. We do a thorough investigation of existing conditions of this space and provide an actual budget as opposed to a guesstimate, so to speak. And and then we also add a contingency in there to kind of give you a little bit of a cushion. So if we end up running into some unforeseen conditions, we do have a little bit of money that's already been budgeted for those items that kind of avoids the budget being blown.
Jeannie, what's the best way to tell your lender the budget is blown?
Well, I want to add on to what Sally said before we get to the conversation of how you tell your lender. It's important to do a little bit of pre-planning with the developer. One is understanding your contractor. Does the contractor have the proven ability to construct this size and type of improvement? Do they have the financial capacity to back the project? Do they have adequate staff and resources to complete their workload? Secondly, Sally pointed this out, is there contingency in the budget? And from the bank's perspective, we're going to want to see contingency over and above what the contractor has in their budget. Ideally, we're seeing 5%. Outside of the contractor contingency. But back to the question at hand is when you need to approach the lender to tell them the budget's busted, the best way to do that is, as quickly as possible, be open and transparent with your banker and let them know, why did the budget bust? Is this an isolated event? Is it ongoing? What's the resolution and of the project? And then discuss the resolution of the budget directly with your banker as to how we're going to bridge that bust.
Mike, what's happening with labor and material costs? I know that lumber has more than doubled in price.
Well, labor and material costs are both going up. I'll touch on labor first and then discuss material costs, but labor is going up. As many people know, or many may not be aware, our industry across the board, residential and commercial, are experiencing a severe shortage of labor to the point where there is competition with some subcontractors trying to increase their staff by hiring away. So there's a little bit of a labor war. I don't know that we're feeling a lot of that here, where the guys can make some extra money if they go jump ship and go to another company. That's driving the cost of labor because a lot of subcontractors are incentivizing keeping their staff in place by giving them more money. With that said, and the shortage of labor is creating a premium for anybody to, as a subcontractor, you have to be committed to your project. And so we're seeing that going up, plus cost of living is going up. We've seen prices for just everything going up, including groceries and all that. It's all relative to a higher wage being paid to the trades. With materials, and I'll touch on this briefly, but since COVID hit in March, there was a severe interruption of the supply chain, and it goes all the way through manufacturing of construction materials, equipment, even things not related to construction. We experienced a project that we're working on right now where we had to order a switchgear, and we ordered it just as this was about to hit, and we're given a 5 to 6 month lead time. And we had to redesign and use individual services because that was going to affect our schedule. So that's what's happening too. But materials, lumber products are expensive, are going up. They were soft for quite a while, but they're going up because the housing market is so strong. And the housing market primarily uses lumber as a construction material for the construction of houses. We're seeing that, which was a pretty soft commodity through the lean years of 2008 to probably 2020. Concrete's increasing quite a bit because there are some material shortages. Fly ash, which is one admixture, there is a shortage of it due to the reduction of burning coal. Fly ash is a byproduct of it, though it's not a critical component of concrete. Demand is also driving the price of concrete to over $125 a cubic yard.
Well, thank you, Mike.
Sure.
For our audience, if you have any questions, please submit them by using the Zoom question box, and we will try to answer them as time allows. Matt, what other shortages or impending shortages do you see that due to a potential shutdown? And what amount of lead time do you recommend in ordering materials?
Sure. So impending shutdown is kind of an interesting topic right now with the COVID spike that's happening throughout the country. You've seen some states already, I mean, Michigan, New Mexico, reacting on a state level to issue stay-at-home orders. And so that stuff, if it continues to happen, the local and state governments, if they step in and they're telling people to stay home and putting those orders out, then I'm anticipating that, we could be seeing longer lead times for manufactured equipment, material, that type of thing. Unfortunately, so historically with the around the holidays, shortages, material lead times are always a challenge because a lot of different plants, manufacturing will shut their facilities down come around the holidays, and that's still an issue. But now coming into that season with the COVID spike and how the local governments are reacting to it, there's concern on my end, and we're pushing to make sure that we're in communication with all the manufacturers as much as possible, getting our submittals done as soon as possible, getting things approved, so that we're getting here in time. So I think that's a big concern going forward, is to see what the reaction is going to be. And then also what reactions and what steps will be taken on a federal level come the beginning of next year, when we, potentially have a new president.
Matt, let me do a follow-up question. For those landlords who want to put in a new tenant and they need a tenant improvement that's in gray shell condition, historically, you could say, okay, we could get it done in about 40 days. Is that still the case?
What was the size?
Let's say it's a 1,200 square foot gray shells office space, and the landlord says, we'll get you in 45 days. Okay, is that doable?
Yes, see Mike smirking. You're talking about taking a gray shell component to TI space.
Yes.
And I'm assuming that, it's 45 calendar days, not how us contractors schedule it by working days.
It's always 45 calendar days, but the landlord's hoping you can get it done in 30 days.
Right. It's a challenge. It's a challenge for sure. I'm not saying it can't be done. But one of the things that I wanted to get into later on when we talk about some of these other topics is, more so than now, it's incredibly important what the project delivery method that the owners are taking. I'm a big advocate for CM at risk or design build or negotiated type projects. And a lot of that is, there's a reason, because contractors are involved earlier on in the process. And so if it's a, old school, design it, bid it, build it, and then, you got 4 days, 5 days to mobilize after contract award, you're going to have a lot harder time to achieve that than you would if you're working through a negotiated contract with a client and their manpower is aligning with exactly what the deliverable is to a client.
Okay. All right. So we'll delve into that a little bit further. Sally?
Sure.
Sally, subcontractor crews are a serious issue. How do you get a full crew to show up and even stay for a full day of work?
Oh, first of all, I threaten their lives. No, I'm just kidding. So first of all, you got to communicate the challenges that all of the GCs are having and the trades as well, with the manpower and the lack of manpower. So if you communicate that with your client up front, I'll just constantly reiterate the communication, because we're all challenged with this. I'm even finishing my project, my clients are even going to be challenged even opening up to full capacity because of the COVID situation. So they're communicating that with me. I do the same for them. So, and I think also because of the manpower shortage that we're having, we always want to stay in clear communication with the trades as well. It's not fair to give them short notice that we need them on a job. So making sure that the schedule is staying updated consistently, you're sharing that consistently. And even though you're sharing it via email, you're still making those phone calls prior to them needing to be on the job to make sure that they're still scheduled and that they do still have manpower. We also provide them some flexibility to push in after hours work if it helps with their particular manpower. But again, it's all about communication and making sure that you're being fair not only to your client, but to your trades as well. We all got to work together to end the same goal, which is to finish the job. So that's the game plan on my end.
Well, thank you, Sally.
Jason,
Mike?
if you don't mind, I was gonna
Yes.
just add in just a couple things to that, if that's okay. So what Sally said is absolutely 100% true. The only thing I would also mention, I mean, the workforce in Tucson specifically, and Mike can attest as well, I'm sure, but it's a challenge. The lack of skilled labor on your jobs, I mean, for large commercial construction work, there's probably, 2 rough carpentry companies that in Tucson that can do the job. And so a lot of that, getting subcontractors on our projects is based on relationships and them understanding you. They've got, if you're communicating the schedule like Sally mentioned, and they know when they're supposed to be there, and they know that when they get there, it's going to be ready for them to be efficient. And they also know that, I'm going to get paid in a reasonable time. And, they're going to treat me well, then they're going to prioritize those people versus maybe a contractor who's coming in from out of town, who they don't have a relationship with. They don't know them. They're not, they don't know when they're going to get paid, or if it's an owner that has a slow payment process. I mean, all that stuff matters, and it weighs into the decision. If you're a small local subcontractor with 10 plumbers, you're deciding where those 10 plumbers are going to go every day, and you're going to put them in places where, number one, you're going to get, paid on time, and they're going to be ready for you. And it's an organized, operation.
Thank you, Matt. Mike, can you give us an understanding of how the subcontractors' delay impacts the greater project time schedule? As an example, once you get the framing done on a residential or a multifamily project, and now you need the inside drywall, and the drywall crew is delayed, what happens to the rest of the flowing work when it comes to the roofing, the stuccoing, and so forth? What type of delay of an impact can the audience relate to?
Well, I'm sorry, go ahead. It's a domino effect. If your carpenters are late, not able to finish, you can't bring your electrical and plumbing in, you can't bring your HVAC in, all of those things start sliding the project along the critical path. And getting a project back on track requires subcontractors committing to either trying to increase the manpower on the project, working some weekends to try and help keep that scale from sliding. We have, and I know it'll come up, but we have several projects where the owner, who normally doesn't institute liquidated damages, has put them in as a component of our contract in order to show the subcontractors there is a cost related to the delay of getting the project open. And we will bring that up in our weekly meetings when we're on site. Matt and Sally both touched on the communication, treating your subs like they're important, which they are. They're our absolute lifeblood. All of those things and getting them to work with you are very important. What we're seeing, and I've experienced this in a couple of circumstances where we were about to send contracts out too, and subcontractors have come back and said, well, Raytheon's got 12 buildings and I can't do your job. I'm going to be tied up till January. So we're getting ready to go to contract, and we had to go to our backup in one case. Another is there's a lot of student housing projects going on right now. Those suck a lot of the trades. They're fast paced, they're big jobs, and some of them have, one project in particular, I think has about 250, 300 workmen on it every day. From a small scale, that's a big impact, but it's a challenge when you start sliding, and everything is related to it. And us telling a contractor or our client we're going to get that project back on track is probably not a realistic statement to make, but you've got to minimize the damage.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mike. So Mike just said, Jason, once you fall behind, it's not possible to get it back on track. And now I'm sweating bullets because now I'm going to have to call my lender and say, we're not on track. Is there a way to bring a project back on schedule, or is it once it's off the tracks, it's off the tracks?
I mean, to an extent, like Mike said, I mean, once it's off the tracks, it's off the tracks. This is where a lot of the value of a general contractor, and depending on who, they've got running the job as a superintendent, they make a big difference. There's ways to look at it. I'm on a project right now that we're working on, that we've got a certain subcontractor that has been falling behind, and we're, we do all the things that we talk about where, we're communicating the schedule, we're, talking to them about what the expectations are. We're trying to have meetings and working with them about that. But, it's, I think, number one, being flexible, understanding with the client what the, clearly communicating and understanding what the deliverables are. Is it, I need to take possession of the space by this time? What does that mean? Do I need to put furniture in here? Or do I actually have to be, is it substantial completion? Is it, there are ways to get temporary C of O? I mean, there's creative ways to try and maneuver that type of situation. The other thing is just really trying to break down, like we just took this one job and we broke it into 2 schedules and running each one now independently. And bouncing crews back and forth to try and, figure out how to make sure we still hit the date where the furniture is being sold. It's an office TI. And it seems to work. It's working right now, but it's definitely a challenge. And, unfortunately, with the way that the manpower is right now, we can, as general contractors or owners, we can jump up and down and kick and scream and demand for attention, but if you've got a subcontractor that isn't performing, the last ditch effort really is you're talking about, putting a subcontractor on notice, and, now you're getting into legal situations with them. And once you start that snowball, it is can get pretty ugly pretty quick. So really just trying to work with the subs, analyzing your critical path, knowing exactly what the deliverables are, looking at, what type of, there used to be expediting fees that we could pay for material that was maybe, behind. That pretty much, I don't know about you guys, Mike or Sally, I haven't seen everybody just kind of laughs when we ask. So that's not really an opportunity anymore. And, at the end of the day, it comes down to money.
Real quick, Sally, Matt, and Mike, I wanted you to just give me a percentage of how many of your projects are off the rails, not on time. Sally, you first. How many projects? What's your percentage of projects that are not meeting the time frame schedule?
I'm not gonna lie, I don't hit them right on the button, but a lot of times the extended time is usually about a week or so out. And some of those delays have been caused by the processing of the permits. I mean, I've done a lot of TIs over the last 6 months that actually were completed 100% without even having a permit. So the only thing that's really been a permit process, but I've gotten all the inspections. I've been able to work with the city of Tucson inspectors to still do their inspections along the way while it's being processed. But those have been the delays that have caused mine. But I haven't had it to where it's been like an excessive, like, a month, that kind of thing, because my projects are typically 8 to 12 weeks, as far as the length on average for my larger tenant improvements.
And Mike, and your projects, what's the percentage that are on schedule?
Careful, Mike.
I like the other question. No, I would say right now we're probably at 20 to 30% of our projects are behind. So 70% of them are on schedule. But with that said, we have projects in various states of construction. We have 2 sizable projects right now that we extended the time frames out by 1 month due to circumstances beyond our control. It wasn't manpower issues. One of them is a building that we're doing a major renovation on, and there have been just a variety of unknown, unforeseen conditions that we had to go back to the engineers and the architects to get some details drawn and that type of stuff. And we do have some impending deadlines on that we have to make. We can't miss. So we got our one-time extension on that. The other is a national retailer. And with some changes that came up from the tenant, getting those processed and getting those approved through the landlord took us about a month, and we had a delay on that. We've had not so much but beginning of the year, weather delays and that type of thing. We work very hard. I think when COVID hit, we probably lost a little bit more time on a few of our projects that were right in the middle of that. But
okay.
Anyways.
Matt, what about your firm? What percentage of your projects are on time?
Well, I mean, I think the majority of our projects are on time. But we have, like everybody, we're dealing with things that are, not that we're just dealing with them as they come. I mean, I've got a project that it's a fast food project that the client spent X amount of dollars to expedite the schedule, the permitting process. And the city of Tucson had ramped up their people, and we got the review done within a couple weeks from Stantec, and but then it got in the queue and wasn't approved for about a month and a half. And so, on a 120, 90-day job, a month and a half delay where we're not able to get a permit is a problem. And so, try to work with the client as best you can. And, we've definitely gone forward in construction to the point where we would need a permit, anticipating the timeline and working with the city and understanding where it is. But, and I mentioned earlier, we have an issue with a subcontractor who all of a sudden, all their jobs, they were on delay, they weren't starting, and then they all started at once, and they got handed a bunch of contracts. And, now they're trying to figure it out. And so now we're trying to work with that sub. And so we definitely are dealing with, we're not immune to any of the issues that anybody here are dealing with. But
Thank you.
I think
Thank
for
you,
the most
Matt.
part, it's really setting the expectation.
Right, thank you. So Jeannie, you've been hearing from 3 great contractors the problems out there during the construction. So how does the bank handle broken priority, broken timeframes, and budgets? When what do they do? What do you do when they say, we're in trouble, I need some help?
Sure. Ideally, on the construction loan, hopefully we've built in a little cushion there that can accommodate for project delays. However, most importantly, we need to understand what the ramifications of that is. Will the tenant still accept the space? Do they have the ability to walk away? What does the lease say? And then Mike spoke to this, what kind of penalties are involved with the delays? In regard to the blown budget, we do always need to retain a balanced budget. So if there is no remaining contingency available, or there's no excess line items that have excess capacity that can be tapped from, we're going to be looking to the developer to inject the equity for that budget shortfall. Talking about broken priority for a minute, so broken priority meaning the construction has commenced before the bank senior lien is in place. There's a higher level of due diligence by the title company and the bank. We need to ensure that all outstanding liens have been paid because construction is actively in place. We will increase our date downs during construction. Often we'll do a title date down at each draw when there's been broken priority. And then title will play an increased role as well, is that they will thoroughly review the budget, the appraisal, the sponsor strength before they insure over broken priority.
Okay, well, thank you. We have a question from Ted Herman of Larson Baker Company. And Matt, why don't you try to answer this question, and then we'll see what Mike and Sally have to say.
Okay, yeah, I just read the question from Ted.
Okay, let me read it to the audience. Can anyone provide current general pricing guesstimate ranges on a per square foot basis for site work, grading, utilities, paving, curbing, etc., for an undeveloped commercial parcel, 9,000 square foot strip center, office utilities stub to property? No pressure, won't hold you to it. Looking for a sale pro forma number. That's from Ted Herman. So Matt, why don't you take a shot along with Mike and Sally?
Well, I mean, so I'll say what I always say, and Ted, I think you've asked me this before, and my response is usually the same, that if you weren't looking to hold me to it, you wouldn't be asking for a question for a price.
Exactly. Yeah.
and Jason's the same way. It's I'm not. There's so many variables to take into account that I wouldn't feel safe guiding you in that. One of the lessons that was instilled in me from my mentor, Kevin Morrissey, is never throw out guest numbers. I'm sure, much like Mike and Sally, I'd be happy to give you a budget and work with you on it if you want to send me over some information. But not trying to get a sale out of this, but I'm just.
Mike, you have anything to add?
Call me, Ted.
Sally, could you give Ted your phone number?
Yeah, I have to agree, I mean, especially when you're dealing with the utility companies and, with the material cost increases that have been fluctuating. And I've been told that, they're still going up with, I don't know if I would even feel comfortable giving a guesstimate on something like that either, and then they kind of have that number set in their head and then they're starting to work a budget based on that. And even though they say that they wouldn't hold it to you, I have to agree. It's hard to throw that number out there, don't hold me to it, and then you actually estimate the job and then you're 2, 5, 10 times higher. How can you justify it? So at this point, I would have to decline.
So Sally, that point, ending at that point leads to the next question. Then how do you better manage a budget? If you're saying don't hold me to this budget or this number, then how does a developer better manage a budget? How do we know when those numbers can be locked in or at least stabilized?
Well, I mean, I often bid a lot of projects based on just walking a space. They want to put an office here, they want to put a bathroom here, and so on and so forth. And as I mentioned earlier, my whole entire team in, we do a full investigation of what we can and cannot do. Obviously, we can't see under concrete, so I don't know how deep my sewer is. So we're just taking some estimates there. And like I mentioned, we add that contingency in there. So we are in a sense giving a guesstimate, but I think because of all of the extra investigation that we do, I feel a lot more comfortable with an actual budget and adding that slight contingency. I personally have not experienced to where the budget is that drastically off. If they want something 100% guaranteed, then they need to give me a set of plans to be working from with all of the unknowns already put on a piece of paper. I just haven't experienced it with the strategies that I have taken over the past several years that I've implemented. I don't know what the other two would, if they agree to that or not, but transparency is a great word that Jeannie used earlier. You got to be transparent with your client and just the communication and you do your due diligence up front. You feel confident with the numbers that your trades are providing you for those estimates, and that's the way it works.
So Mike, to follow up on Sally, she says, you need to feel confident with the numbers the trades are providing you. What % of contingency do you suggest a developer factor in case those numbers aren't as strong as we thought?
Can I add something to the last question first and then answer this, Jason?
Yes.
Okay, so we get asked, I'm sure Matt does too, to provide budget estimates for ground ups, development projects, et cetera. A question on the fly, and I get them all the time, and I'm sure you do too, Matt. What does something cost? We got to sit down and we've got to look at the lot. We got to sit down and look at the building type, the construction. If we're in a hard digging situation, how far the utilities are down the road. We get all of that information put together and we're able to figure that out. We can give the owner, our client, a budget to run a pro forma. And the project moves forward and they get into design development and we get into some more specifics, we can begin to hone our budget. Leading into the next question, as we go through budgeting, there are probably at least two, if not three different stages that we're putting a budget together. One is a budget where we're figuring initially try to be as in a worst case scenario based on our costs. There may be a time at the very beginning where we want to factor a 10% contingency. As we're able to go through the documents and documents are being developed and we get more specifics about the project, we probably would want to carry a 5 to 7% contingency on our numbers.
Okay, all right. So Jeannie, you've been hearing all the contractors talk about budgeting, how difficult it is. What meetings are required or would you prefer to have with the developers and contractor before construction starts?
Sure. An important tool that we use on our construction projects is the plan cost review. So we'll take the plans, the contractor's budget, it will send that out to a third-party engineering firm, and they will go line by line and deliver a report back to us and say, you know what, in their estimation that this budget can, we can build this building for this budget. If they have concerns or questions, they'll come back. They may want to see more detail. They may want to see additional subcontractor contracts, but that's an important tool that we use to ensure that we feel that the budget will be able to deliver that building.
Okay, so Mike, on that note, are you seeing a greater use of guaranteed maximum price contracts?
We are, and I think we have, and it depends. It depends on the delivery. If we're working on a negotiated project where we're developing the budget and also developing the final cost, our owners want the ability to enter into a contract with a guaranteed maximum price and open book accounting. I actually like that delivery method myself, because we're then able to, it's not competitive. We're able to pick our 3 subs out of the best 3 that we can, and we can deliver a very realistic, very well-covered budget. The owner gets to see the costs and based on that, and is given any credits back as well. So
Okay.
I would say we see him probably 50% of the time.
All right. And Matt, are you seeing a greater use of penalty clauses for missed deadlines? And if you are, how effective are they?
I'm not seeing them very often. To Mike's point, I mean, majority of our work is negotiated projects that have a GMP contract, where we're involved very early on. And one of the things that I was going to mention earlier, creating a project timeline schedule. We've got several different design build contracts where we're actually hiring the architect underneath us and being held responsible for them, which contractually is a little bit interesting, but we're developing an overall timeline budget where we've got pre-construction all the way through construction. We're building in the lead times for all the materials. And so, it's not typically, if we're hard bidding a job, we do a risk assessment. And if there's liquidated damages on the project, we're probably going to pass, especially based on, the environment and the atmosphere that's going on right now in the industry. It's very, very hard to guarantee things. And unfortunately, when there's liquidated damages right out of the gate into a contract, it starts the relationship off adversarial. Our press is that if there's going to be liquidated damages, then we're going to ask for a bonus clause for, to offset the risk if we're going to be early. We find that typically that usually neutralizes the liquidated damages, but I don't believe that they're, you shake a stick over somebody's head. I don't think that they're really that, I don't think they're that useful. If you're going with a contractor where you feel you have to put in liquidated damages, you probably have the wrong contractor. It's my belief in it. Because if we're not doing everything we possibly can in your best interest, so that you have a successful project, you can turn it over and, we can go on ideally to the next project together, then, what are we doing? So that's my theory on it. I don't know if Mike and Sally agree.
Right. Well, thank you, Matt. So Sally, everyone's been, not everyone, but the few questions that we've had answered, we were talking about a percentage contingency of around 5 to 7%. is that still, are you still comfortable with that number for cost overruns and falling behind in schedule?
Yeah, I'd have to agree. Sometimes I negotiate with the client as well, especially if they are going for like an SBA funding or something like that. So sometimes we'll negotiate something a little bit higher to that way they have a little bit of more cushion if they need to make some changes in the project. And then if the contingency doesn't get spent, it doesn't get spent, they get it back. So, on average, it's probably 5 to 8% that I just kind of say that this is probably the best for unforeseen conditions. But, they have asked for, 10 to 12 to give them a little bit more, so they don't have to come out of pocket, especially small business startups. They want to try to avoid coming out of their own pocket until that's settled. So.
Okay. So Jeannie, with what you've been hearing, when it comes to getting a construction loan, what are the loan requirements in regard to pre-leasing? And what type of interest rates are out there now, and the amortization, and how much equity does a developer need to bring in to get a loan from you?
So sure. So this is similar to the question that Ted had posed to the panel. This is not something that I can just, have a set criteria that it's X and it's Y, but it'll be highly, customized to the individual project and developer. You need to review the project metrics, the sponsor strength. Is there a guarantee or no guarantee? We want a guarantee. Is the project special use? Is it a credit tenant, a multi-tenant, a single tenant? In general, before we start construction, we want to see executed leases in place that achieve at least a 1.0 debt cover using a sensitized interest rate. We want to review the lease. We'd like to see, leases in place that at least meet our loan term. If not, are there extension options? There's just so many, there's a multitude of variables that we look at when we're putting that package together.
So when you put that package together, how long does it take?
From start to end, it probably depends on the scope of the project, but I would say on average, you're probably 60 to 90 days. It's probably an average time frame.
Okay. Now here's a question for all of you, and we'll start with Sally, Mike, and then Matt. What's the biggest development issue or concern that you see in Tucson?
I think it's going to have to be the city of Tucson and their response and processing of permits. That has been going on a very long time, and it's challenging for not only us as the general contractor, but for the client who wants to open up for business. It is just, I don't know how or when that's going to get rectified, but it certainly needs to be addressed because, just in my business, I just think that is probably the largest challenge right now, especially now that they're trying to incorporate Pima County's development services to help their backlog for the city's backlog. It's really put a stress on even Pima County jobs. And, the county was running, in my experience, was running fine until the city tried to get them involved in helping them. I don't know what the other two would like to chime in on that, but in my experience, I think that the processing of permits and to be able to get us to flourish back opening up small businesses, that really needs to kind of be a focal point.
Okay, and Mike?
Well, I agree with everything Sally said. I think it also part of the issue is the lack of leadership within the city council and the lack of or their inability to take this issue seriously. I am not have heard a lot of things about the I wouldn't say anti-growth, but not very excited about the growth of Southern Arizona, and namely Tucson. We are seeing a better response with Pima County. We're seeing a huge response with the town of Oro Valley. We're working on a project now where they're very cooperative and very excited to help us, and they're pro-growth, which wasn't always the case. Marana's very pro-growth. The city's really showing that this is not a big concern, and the city is not being able to take advantage of a tremendous opportunity for growth now. And so I'm just going to say that I think the leadership definitely needs to take a harder look at this and make it a priority.
Matt?
Yeah, I mean, what Sally said, I think permitting is a huge concern. I mean, obviously these are uncharted times, and but to have the situation where just everything stops, and then, you know, also be on the other side being told we're essential, you know, it's kind of a tough place to be, where, you know, you're being told to work, but you can't get any permits to do it. And then, you know, to Mike's point, I think leadership, I think, you know, alignment on expectations of the clients, and that goes from the, you know, local government on down, and making sure that we're all on the same page. But then the only thing that I would add is what I see as the biggest concern isn't anything that has to do with COVID. It's not anything that has to do with, you know, anything recent. It's the lack of skilled trades, specifically in Southern Arizona. Phoenix is better. But like Mike said, I mean, earlier, when we've got, you know, 2, 3, 4 student housing projects, there's only so many qualified people, skilled tradesmen in Tucson, and those jobs suck them up. And, you know, if you're not working on those jobs, you're left to kind of fend for yourself. And so, you know, trying to promote trades, being master plumber, master carpenter, electrician, those types of things, and putting trade schools together. You know, the JTED building that's being built now is a big deal. But, you know, it's just, I think really pushing that as an alternative to going to college and getting, you know, a degree and being a lawyer and all those other things, that you can have a really good living, and promoting that. And that's a long game, because it's going to be really hard to do. It's not something that can be done tomorrow, but.
Okay. And Jeannie, do
Agreed.
you have anything to add to what the biggest concern is?
No, I think in the, you know, in the short term, you know, projects that have been industries that are heavily impacted by COVID in the short run, you know, perhaps they're delaying, you know, projects. I think the construction projects that have a longer duration, you know, those, hopefully we've got, you know, the virus under control. And, you know, anything else to add? You know, things that, you know, we look at when we look at industries, you know, the impact of the remote workplace, how is that going to impact office, and the changing face of retail, just kind of other side thoughts of other things to add there.
Okay.
Mhm.
And our last question for the panel, what area of construction do you see increasing in 2021 and decreasing? Sally, you can go first.
I'm not quite sure which industry I would see as decreasing. I would hope that we will see an increase in small business and tenant improvements, and getting that economy to flourish again. I think it's really important for us to support the small businesses. They are bread and butter of our economy here. So it would be great to see that come to fruition. And then I definitely believe that residential construction is just going to continue in its uprise.
Mike?
Increasing residential for sure is definitely going to continue. I see industrial increasing. Talking to a couple of my commercial real estate brokers that I work with, industrial seems to have been pretty active. Retail, restaurant, hospitality, entertainment, I think those are going to decrease in the short term until this COVID stuff goes away. We've seen working with some of our retail clients and some of the national ones, the malls are losing some tenants. Restaurants are definitely struggling. Movie theaters are struggling. I think that particular sector of the commercial real estate market is going to see a decline, at least in the foreseeable future, until people are able to gather and socialize like we're used to, or whatever the new normal is.
Okay, and Matt, your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think retail, restaurant, hospitality in the next year are going to struggle. I mean, we've already seen, I think, just starting to see the tip of the iceberg with a lot of restaurants starting to go under, and it's really sad to see, especially when we spent so much money investing into downtown and some of these other places. So I think those three sectors are going to have a hard time, but I think they'll also rebound pretty quick. And once I think, people start getting comfortable, hopefully with vaccines and that type of thing. And then increasing, Mike hit it on the head, I think industrial warehouse. I've been asked about, we've done several in the last year, large cooler freezer distribution facilities where, you've got everybody shopping even more so on Amazon and, these other, e-commerce places. Residential obviously is going to keep going up, I think, especially in more remote areas in Tucson. And then I also think that medical is going to increase. I think, this has been a little bit of a wake up that there's some stuff that infrastructure wise in the medical field that aren't really there. And then I think really medically more so on, smaller type. You've seen a lot of Banner made a huge initiative to put all these kind of smaller clinics throughout, as opposed to you've got to go into, the hospital. I think people are a lot more comfortable with that. And I think also with, dealing with the pandemic, people are going to be a lot more comfortable being more spread out and not being in a giant facility. And then I think ultimately, somebody's going to have to address, the infrastructure throughout the U.S., not just Tucson, but roads, utilities, bridges, highways. I mean, bringing fiber into cities as opposed to, everything, to attract businesses to a local market. That's one of the biggest things that they look at. It's because everything's internet based now. And so if you don't have the internet speeds, that's a big deal. Okay,
well, that's great. I want to thank the panelists for their participation in our Contractors webinar. A big thank you to Tiffany Miner and also to our sponsors. We have upcoming events. We have a holiday party on December 3rd, and we have a land webinar also. So be sure to look forward to these announcements in your email. We want to again thank our sponsors. Without our sponsors, we could not put these webinars together. Please support our sponsors. Thank you very much for attending our seminar, and I look forward to seeing you in our future seminars. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jason.
Thank you, everyone.
Mhm.